If you tore off the legs of a spider, instead of it living on, realizing that it purely had a limb deficiency, the spider itself may think that something was originally wrong with it. In 2013, a criminal case against a 17-year-old boy, Ethan Couch, who had killed 4 people while drunk driving, startled the news with his defense, a social description dubbed Affluenza. During the trial, the presented psychologist testified that Ethan was suffering from affluenza, that he had been stripped away from any resilience-building activities due to his privileged upbringing, which ultimately caused him to be unable to act under responsibility. This had never been touched on before, and it caught the world by storm. There was a huge controversy as to whether his defense was merely created to characterize his lack of liability, and news broadcasters and psychologists alike were analyzing this so-called condition, trying to see if it actually did exist. Nonetheless, it was concluded that affluenza was more of an explanation rather than an excuse. It was less so the outcome of bad parenting and more so the outcome of an insufficient exposure to challenging experiences. This so-called condition, despite being affronted by many, ended up being recognized in future generations, leading up to our current one of Generation Z. Recently, psychologists have reported on the increase of mental illnesses, such as anxiety or depression, within adolescents. The strange thing is, they don't know the cause. Conditions like the ones mentioned beforehand can't be inflicted on someone, nor can it be spread like a virus. What makes it even more interesting is that it was specifically from those in a higher class. Relations can be drawn to affluenza quite easily, as side effects like anxiety or low self-esteem were brought up in the Ethan Couch case. However, what can be asked about this is, are these cases real or not? Are they fake news or not? In other words, are people in the privileged class malingering? Now, malingering is a word that not many people know about. When I asked a few of my peers to revise my outline for the talk, not one of them knew the meaning of the word. However, this word is very much real, and not only will it shine some light on the alleged spike of mental illnesses, but it also ties in directly with affluenza as well. Malingering is the term for when someone feigns a sickness or condition to achieve some sort of goal. This goal can vary from wanting more attention to escaping some sort of privation. How does this tie in with affluenza? Well, adolescents are made to face challenging experiences to build skills for adulthood, but affluenzics are not equipped to face these experiences, as their parents shield them from experiences that nurture persistence. To avoid failure, they overemphasize behaviors associated with natural hormonal changes. And because of their place in the privileged class, people respond to them with a lot of attention and concern, thus reinforcing their malingering habits, creating a cycle that's hard to break. Now, as harsh as this sounds, I'm not accusing every single person in a somewhat privileged class that their mental health doesn't matter. It is a serious issue. However, some of them have gone through their entire lives without experiencing any sort of failure or setback. And while this does save for a more comfortable infancy, it also alienates them from the nature of humans. Hence, they take their lack of experience and responsibility with them into adulthood. This is mainly because of their parents, shielding them and protecting them from experiencing any real hardships. This can not only happen to anyone in the privileged class, but anyone in a first world country, really. It's because we don't go through these things enough to experience them. So when a small hardship does happen in comparison to our normal lives, something is wrong. For instance, if you've never gotten physically injured at all in your entire childhood, and then as a fully grown adult, you sprain your ankle, wouldn't the added shock and unfamiliarity make the situation worse? Going into something more social-based, if you've never gotten any negative feedback in your entire life, then how are you going to react to that as an adult who's supposed to be experienced in these things? You'd avoid it, right? Wouldn't it be a lot better if you had some sort of excuse? Well, backtracking to all of this, I asked whether these new cases of mental illnesses were fake news or not. And I'm sure that these two words made you visualize something, whether it be biased news channels or empty promises. The words fake news evoked something in your imagination, right? Well, to me, especially in this situation, fake news only means that the claims are not to the extent that the facts being referenced to are. While people who claim to have these defects do go through psychological and mental challenges, it's not as nearly life-threatening as it is. This cannot happen to only just the richest class, but anyone in a first world country. For example, last year I faced episodes due to low blood sugar. I experienced symptoms like trembling, blurry vision, experiencing a cold sweat, and many others. And it was because I wasn't eating enough and my body was breaking down. This is all what was happening in the real world, but whilst I was still out of the know, a peer suggested that, hey, maybe you're having anxiety attacks, as in real attacks that are only inflicted on those with the disorder. And this, to me, going on a little side tangent here, is one of the most confused conditions because having anxiety as an emotion and as a condition are so similar, with the only difference being that the disorder symptoms are heightened. Going back to my low blood sugar episodes, I was so sure what I had was a mental disorder. I was constantly worrying about when I was going to have another one. I kept trembling, and even though I should have been open-minded and left it up to the professionals, I decided that no, I did have a mental disorder. To this day, having been so close-minded on something so serious is one of my biggest regrets, and it also made me ask myself, why? Why was I so adamant that I had this defect? Why was I so sure and close the book and say, no, I have an anxiety disorder, and that's that? And it wasn't until I hit an epiphany that I realized it's because of the unfamiliarity. I'd never experienced anything like that in my childhood, as it was always fulfilling. I had food to eat, time to eat it, and I wasn't putting myself under the amount of pressure that I was when my low blood sugar hit. And it was because of this that it took an emotional toll on me as a teenager. In my eyes, the symptoms were heightened, and I didn't want to believe that it was normal in fear that it would lead to failure in my daily life. And this is the mindset that affects so many people in my generation. We, like the spider, face something that we're not equipped to handle. Us as a community, especially in a first world country, don't go through these things enough to have an understanding of it. Hence, we don't understand them. And because of this, then we don't understand the real world. Therefore, it's extremely important to go through smaller hardships to act as sort of a behavioral vaccine, so that in the future, when we're leading, we know what's going on. It's extremely important for people in my generation and class to go through social misfortune early on, so that in the future, when we are all adults, we have more experience and we know everything that's going on in our minds. Thank you.